Dan Lohrmann, who used to, gosh, you worked with lots of different governors at the state of Michigan. David Behen, who worked with Governor Snyder and now works with Governor Snyder on a private project. And Richard Stiennon, who goes all the way back to RusNet days in the 1990s. So we're going to have a roundtable discussion here since it's Cyber Awareness Month. And all these guys are cyber pros. So why don't we kick it off with David, since he hasn't been on the show in, gosh, about a year or so. Now, what you're doing with Rick Snyder is a private organization that's focused on small to medium businesses, and it's a CISO, or not a CISO, but it's a SaaS, a software as a service company. I get all these acronyms for a while, So talk a little bit about that, and then we'll go back to Dan and Richard. And I know you and Dan worked together, I believe, didn't you?
Yeah, I want to say thank you to you and Matt and to Dan and Richard. It's good to see everybody. It's kind of like, a group of folks that work together really closely, from like 2011 to 2017. And it's good to see everybody. And Richard and Dan, I can remember back in the day, you guys would talk about, in 2011, how cyber is going to become a big deal. Certainly has. And it's really good to see you guys. And I'm glad I could sit on this panel with you. So Governor Snyder and I and a couple other entrepreneurs started a company called Sensi. It stands for Sensible Cyber. And it's focused on small and medium-sized organizations. In my work with Dan in the past and Richard and everybody, and working in big companies, we noticed that, the small and medium-sized organizations were largely being ignored when it came to cybersecurity. And so it's a giant market. And, when I talked to Governor Snyder about it, this has been 2 years ago now, he got really excited about the idea as well, because really what we could do is, a lot of this is under Dan's leadership too at the state, is we put together this kind of proactive cybersecurity program for the state of like 50,000 employees, right? And we kind of, it had everything you needed to do to help, to educate and put together a cyber program. Well, I took it to Lazy Boy, and I did it the Lazy Boy at the global level. And now we figured, why can't we do that with small and medium-sized organizations all across the United States and maybe the world? And so we're excited about it. It's a software as a service, and it's off to a good start. We're just a little bit over a year old, Mike, but things are going pretty well.
Good to know. All right. And Dan, you can tell your bona fides. Now, you've been out of public service for close to 10 years, isn't it?
Yeah, 2014, October 2014. But I just want to mention Dave's a great leader. He's very humble, David Behen, but he was my boss at the state. I was the state CSO, and worked with David and Governor, and really the leader of all that was Governor Rick Snyder. And going back 2011, when we had that first one, I just want to mention, we're going to talk about the Michigan Cyber Summit again in October and what's coming up here in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be a great event and details on that. But I do remember back to 2011, it was the Tigers were in the playoffs, and we had Secretary Napolitano there. We had Howard Schmidt from the White House. We had an all-star cast. I think our entire delegation from the Michigan delegation was there, Democrats and Republicans, bipartisan, and it was sold out. We couldn't fit everybody in the Eagle Crest down in Eastern Michigan University, where we had our first one. Then we moved to Novi the next year. But it was a smashing success. We kicked off Cybersecurity Awareness Month. First time Secretary Napolitano had actually done that outside the Beltway. So it was a lot of firsts that year, and it really was a lot of the leadership that David and the governor, and I was involved with it as well, and I led the cyber team. But we had a great team, and it's continuing. It's been that's really what, 23, so 12 years now we've been doing this. As a state, really, it's not a partisan issue. It really is bipartisan, and looking with, Governor Whitmer now looking at this issue of cybersecurity. And I know we're going to talk about some more details, what people can do and how they can do it. But October 18th is the Michigan Cyber Summit. First time they're actually having a 2-day. The second day is for the high schools. I know Tamara was just talking about the high schools. But it's going to be a great event, a lot of great speakers. Go through the list in a few minutes, but real excited about October Awareness Month and giving people tips on how they can protect themselves.
Richard, come on down. So Richard, you can see behind him has a whole bunch of books. And for the last 3 years or 4 years, you've been doing the cyber yearbook, right?
4 years now. Yeah,
4
editions.
years. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've just been thinking in preparation for today, Dan and David were kind enough to invite me to speak at the first Michigan cybersecurity event. And I remember they said, okay, we're going to give you the lunch slot, which is great because, at the very least, people will have something to do while you're talking. But they warned me that, you may have to, we may cancel you because there's a likelihood that the president will fly in. So this would have been President Obama. And I remember being totally cool with having to be upstaged by the president of the United States. So didn't happen, though. I got to speak after all.
All right. Now, I imagine you're going to let's talk a little bit about that. The October 18th, Tamara talked about it already, and we also talked about it in the first segment with ITC. October 18th is for the professionals, more or less, I guess, and then the 19th is for the students. So that's coming up fast. Are you all going to be there or not?
I will be there. Absolutely.
David, you're going to
I'm going to try. I'm going to try to be there for one of the days.
Yeah, I think the first day would probably be a good one. And Richard, you're going to make down and.
No, I'm too busy launching a company here.
Well, you are.
Good for you.
Yes.
The one thing that I'm amazed at is how we all look. We haven't aged one day since that first 2011.
We're getting younger.
Yeah.
Not only did I have hair back then, it used to be red, but thanks anyway.
Okay.
I see all his kids and grandkids are all redheads. So
I just wanted to ask the three of you to sort of start the ball rolling here is how you see the threat landscape as having changed since that first cyber summit. What have we gotten better at protecting? What have the bad guys gotten better at? What's the changes in the environment out there now?
I jump in and Richard, you can jump in too. I mean, I think right now, currently, with artificial intelligence coming at us, the attacks in many ways, even the last couple of weeks, we were just talking with someone about this. They're more sophisticated, and yet they're simpler. I mean, I think we're seeing, text messages coming in saying, hey, you've got to, disguising as security companies, attacks coming at us in ways like, hey, you need to, delete these 3 files, or you need to take this action with your iPhone, you need to do this, do that, click on this link. And it looks like if you didn't know better, it's like in the name of cybersecurity, I'm going to click on this link and delete these files or take this action or, do whatever. And the reality is those are bad actors who are sending you those. I mean, notice how they don't say Apple, they don't say in the name of whatever, or, they're tricking people. And so they're getting better and better. Another example real quick I'll give, we talked about a little bit a few weeks ago, but the MGM attacks that we just had. And tricking people at the help desk and using something like SIM swapping. We won't talk about that technology specifically, but basically fooling the telephone companies into giving your phone number away. So they're pretending to be you. And then they're tricking help desks. They get into MGM resorts, they get into Caesars Entertainment. And then, we're talking about, literally multi-million dollars, probably tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage and breaches and outages by tricking help desks. So in many ways, it's the same types of attacks, but they're just becoming very good at using that in more sophisticated ways to trick people. So.
Yeah, if you think back to 2011, that was only 2 years since Bitcoin came about. And it took another 18 months to 2 years for ransomware to show up on the scene, because now we've always had ransoms and extortions being demanded, but now it's possible to do it without the FBI being able to trace you through Western Union or however you made the payments. So it just took off after that, which, the biggest effect, ransomware, shouldn't impact the large organizations that most of us deal with all the time, because they're doing all the things that you're supposed to do, right? They've got backups. 2, they've got protections against phishing, etc. So it's pretty much a small organization problem. And that has led to small organizations becoming aware of the need for cybersecurity. I know the publisher of, or the printer of my book was hit by ransomware last year as we went to press, and it delayed everything by 3 weeks, but they did have backups. So I was very impressed that Sheridan Books out in Chelsea, Michigan was able to get back up and running in only 3 weeks. And that's just, now cybersecurity truly is something that every organization has to worry about because they're going to get hit. Just in the past, you could say, oh, I'm just a book publisher. I don't have anything some Russian hackers are interested in at all. But now you do, you've got money and they're going to get it from you. So now everybody's part of this.
Yeah. And I think, Richard, that's a great point. It's, because we deal with small and medium-sized organizations all over now. And the days of being a small to medium manufacturer in mid-Michigan thinking, why would anyone ever want to come after me? Right? Those days are gone. Now, the one thing that hasn't changed is it's still an education and awareness issue too, in many ways. Every cyber program, in my mind, in my opinion, has to be wrapped around with great education awareness training. Dan we talked back in the day all the time about cyber hygiene and having to explain cyber hygiene. Well, we're still doing that. And even with the small and medium-sized organization, it's really talking to them about, demystifying cyber. At Sensi, it stands for sensible cyber, right? I tell people, if I speak in acronyms, I got to buy you a drink. And so, it's really just about educating people, as like you said, Richard, it's going down to everyone now, to the individual users. Like Dan mentioned, everyone has iPhones or some kind of, smart device. And so everyone needs to be educated. Everyone needs to understand what's happening in this world. And so some things haven't changed and some things have, but it's, I like to say, Sensi's cyber's like a chronic disease, right? It's always going to be there. And over time, it will get worse. But there's really some common sense, manageable things you can do to manage it.
So I'm a naysayer when it comes to cybersecurity awareness training of any sort. I think it's a total waste of time because you will never come close to being as good at it as the attackers are. Right. So no matter how many times you tell your parents and your friends that they should implement your cell phone authentication on Facebook, they don't until somebody steals their account and starts selling Ray-Bans through their account. And then they have to email all their friends and say, I'm sorry, my account was hacked, so don't believe anything you see that I say. In the end, they implement two-factor authentication. But do they do that on Twitter? No, they wait until somebody takes over their Twitter account and starts selling Ray-Ban sunglasses through Twitter, and same thing over and over. And no matter how many times, and I'm doing this because I'm totally jaundiced and I'm just an old curmudgeon now. I've been telling people what to do for 23 years and figured out, no, they don't. People who don't know what they need to know don't read my blog. So it's just wait, they'll come to you eventually.
Tamara, would you like to respond to the old legend there? Go ahead.
You're not wrong, right? We none of us do the right thing. Always for the right reasons, right? Or do we pay attention to that kind of, talk? But so I agree with you about, so all of us that didn't grow up with this technology, I agree that they're probably going to have some problem before they actually take things on. I totally do. But we have to keep doing it though, because it's all the younger people, right? And it's all the other people that just don't know what they affect, right? So, the receptionist who opens up that email and welcomes in a ransom attack, she didn't, we still need to be hitting on all of that education and training. It's very, very important. And it's very important that we do it as young as possible, because these kids grew up with this stuff. They don't think of it as technology. They think of it as like the microwave or the refrigerator. It's just something they've had in their hands their entire life. And so if we don't tell them that there's scary people out there and there's bad things that can happen to them, and we don't tell it to them in an unscary way, right? But we make it as a part of education and training, just normal, like wash your hands after you use the restroom, put on your seatbelt when you get in the car. If we make it that way, like you said, this is hygiene, right? then it'll get through. And maybe even when they're helping their grandparents get out of whatever problem that they have because they did click on something, they'll know because they were taught young, right? They were taught, as they're using this technology.
Yeah, I would just jump in too, guys. I want to say, Dave, this is one of the areas, one of the few areas that Richard and I disagree as well. And this is an ongoing, disagreement between us. I think, where I agree with Richard is that if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, when David and I were back at the state, we switched it up a couple times. If you watch the same video, the CISOs would tell me it's like watching reruns of Gilligan's Island. I've seen this movie before. But what we need is you got to have brief, frequent, focused content that's engaging, interactive, and teaching people things they don't already know. So if you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, it will fail. And we've seen that again and again around the country. And I'm not selling any specific product right now. I don't even work for the company I used to work for that sold security awareness training. But the reality is this: whatever company you use, make sure you change it up. Make sure you teach people things they don't already know. If you make it engaging, interactive, and you actually help them in learning something new, and actually, teach them about multi-factor authentication, teach them about with case studies, with stories, multiple modes. You got to mix it up. I have so many stories of where, we had a hack and a nurse was hacked and she brought in, and we'd all talk to them from technology perspective and they'd be like, yada, yada, yada. But like the nurse would come in and tell her story passionately. And like, they would be glued. They'd be like listening. They would all run and do whatever she just said because she was one of them. So make it, give them the ownership in the business side. And I do think awareness training can be helpful.
David?
Yeah, and working with large companies, small companies, all of us throughout our career, one of the things that's really still kind of surprising to me, and maybe it shouldn't be, but is that we all live cyber on this live stream. We all live cyber, so it's impacting us every day. We watch it every day. Great majority of people out there are not doing that. A lot of times they think about
not
cyber,
everybody spends an hour on Slashdot every day. I mean, come on.
No, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
But I think these people, I don't like. We've come across a lot of people where they just kind of want to look away and say, maybe it won't happen if I don't think about it. And that's some of the things that I think that's really where it's about, that awareness piece. And we got to really continue to talk about it. We got to really, really, really push out the messaging about it. And that's why I love Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I love October. I love the fact that the state of Michigan still has the North American International Cyber Summit going on, because it's a great, that's one that brings, like Dan said, brings everyone together. And it's not a political issue. It's not a partisan issue. It's somewhere where you can go and make people aware and educate them, whether you're with a big company, small company, nonprofit, government, education, whatever. And that's why it's a great event.
The bad guys aren't red or blue. They're looking for the green, right? So
nice, Mike. Nice.
That was pretty good, Mike. I got it.
like that.
really
Okay,
good.
you can have that. You can throw that into your pitches. I'll give that to you.
There you go. You should, copyright that.
Yeah. Man, I've been dominating this. Go ahead. Leap in there.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask how you think AI is making life more difficult, in the threat environment. I guess that could make it seem, make the pitches seem better. You're not getting the come-ons from the guy in Central Africa that's a prince written in essentially broken English. They're
the
probably
Nigerian
better.
stuff, right? Yeah.
Yes, right. Yeah, they're probably better at it now, and the pitches probably seem more coherent. So talk a little bit about how AI has affected all this.
Well, it's kind of, an extension of our talk on security awareness, right? We spend a lot of time telling people don't trust a link that somebody sends you. Don't trust anything that somebody sends you. AI is rapidly teaching us we can't trust anything at all ever again, right? Not a single thing that appears on your computer screen is trustworthy now. The videos are different. Somebody watching our broadcast here, we could all be AI generated saying, things that somebody wanted it to say. That's good. I think we have to, we should become less trusting. And we have to in order to defend ourselves.
And AI could say Richard loves cyber training, right? So
yeah,
we know that's not right. So
As a matter of fact, if I ever am caught saying that, I'll just say, "Oh no, that was a fake,
How's that darn AI? Yeah.
deep
of
fake."
course.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I would add something else too that it's interesting. There's a lot of different the attacks against us, but I would even say what I'm seeing a lot, and especially in the security communities, we got to get to yes, we got to be enabling with this AI. So I'm not a naysayer on it, but I will tell you that this we call shadow IT issue is a huge one out there right now. It's just it's the idea that anybody in your enterprise, your company, your business, your government, whatever you're doing out there, they're going out, they're doing ChatGPT, Bard, working from home, working from the office. And many cases, they're uploading code. They're uploading, hope they're not uploading sensitive information. They're uploading different tool sets, and free is hard to compete with. So there are paid versions of this where you can keep the data in your enterprise. There are solutions out there, but in many, many companies, that's not what's happening. Many governments, they maybe will be there in a few years. But right now, it's like these free, cool tools that I can upload. Yeah, I'm uploading my resume. I'm uploading all this stuff to it. And the question is, are you just giving things away? Well, you have no control. Once that goes there and it goes into the cloud, and I'm not just talking about Google and Microsoft like ChatGPT and Bard. It could be there's literally hundreds of generative AI tools out there, which are very, very helpful. I mean, they're fun, they're interesting, they're games. There's all kinds of, help you write code better and all of this. But the question is, and I think a lot of companies are struggling with this from a security perspective, is they're giving this stuff away and there's no governance around it. There's no governance, there's no control. So that's a big challenge right now today with generative AI.
Dan, doesn't this remind you of when you first implemented wireless at the government level, right? And all the naysayers and
Good
everyone
one,
said,
Tamara.
just knock it down.
does.
We don't want any of that stuff in here because we can't control it. And I feel like it's the same thing again, right? Because we can't control it. But like you pointed out, Dan, there's an awful lot of ways you can control it by embracing it and bringing it in and making sure you have the secure version that you're using. Because like you said, again, we're back to this, Richard, we're back to human nature again, right? If it's free and it's going to make me look smarter, I'm going to use it. Right. And so if we're going to do that, we need to do that as a group. We need to discuss what are the safe ways to do that, right? And how to keep ourselves safe.
And correct. And so I'm not saying just say no to Gen AI.
I knew you
my
weren't,
story.
but
I wrote an article about that actually. And I almost got fired. David knows the story. I almost got fired back in 2004 from Terry Takai when I was just say no to wireless because war driving. Everybody was hacking in the Home Depot with their wireless accounts, and you can't just say no. This train has left the station. It's coming. Just do it in thoughtful ways. You need to be thinking about this. As a technology professional, as an IT, a CISO, CTO, CIO, how is it being used in your organization? And there are secure ways of doing that. You can use things like Netscope, like Zscaler. There are a lot of tools out there that'll do CASB, Cloud Access Security Brokers, to be able to control and basically just know what's going on. I mean, it's really called visibility. Visibility meaning you can see what's happening on your network and you know who's doing what. That's the first step.
Well, we got 5 minutes left and we got a big crew here to throw out how folks can reach out to you. So Matt, why don't you take it from here and run through the cast of characters here?
Okay. Well, let me see. Why don't we start with Richard, and then we'll proceed.
The old curmudgeon, yes. Old curmudgeon.
We'll proceed clockwise, right? On my screen anyway. So
okay.
Yeah, so just find me on LinkedIn, Richard Stiennon. I'm the only one, I think.
Okay, and Tamara? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I thought I didn't. I'm not officially in this group, right? So Tamara Shoemaker at Tamara Shoe at Gmail, and then again MICyberPatriot.com.
Okay, David, and where can people find you these days?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only David Behen on LinkedIn, and then David Behen at Sensei.com as well.
Okay.
Awesome.
Dan?
Yeah, and Dan Lohrmann again on LinkedIn is really easy. I'm happy to link with you professionals. At GovCSO on X or Twitter. And certainly my blog, Lohrmann on Cybersecurity at GovTech Magazine. If you just Google Dan Lohrmann, you'll see that it'll pop right up. My blog is a weekly blog for Government Technology Magazine. Thank you.
All right. So basically the bottom line is everybody come to the Michigan Cyber Summit. That is October, what's the date? 18th?
18th and 19th.
18th. Yeah. 18th for the professionals. 19th is a really interesting sounding program for K-12. If you have kids in school, you should try to arrange for them to be there because they're going to learn a lot, and it could start them on the road to a really fascinating career where somebody might be the next Tamara, the next David, the next Richard Stiennon, the next Dan Lohrmann. So that's what we want to do, is we want to get more kids interested in this stuff so that they will go on to become the cybersecurity leaders of tomorrow.